So this one's called Truth Bombs Dropped, and it's based on something that I prepared for an interview that I gave on the Amish Inquisition podcast. I'm going to redo it here for two reasons. Only 350 people watched it, and it just seems a shame to waste all of this material that I prepared. And then the second one is that on the podcast, occasionally people kind of interjected with questions, so it's hard to maintain a flow. Anyway, what I want to start off talking about is just some phenomenons. Can't even say that, something in my mouth. Some natural phenomena, I would say, that are just self-evident about the world that we live in. So the first one you could call the law of cause and effect. And it's my firm belief that in this life, we don't get away with anything. Actions really do have consequences. And we are where we are as a result. It's not happenstance or chance. Where we are is where we are because people's actions have made it so. There's been a cause, and then what we're all moaning about is just the effects of the actions of millions of people. The second one is the law of attraction. So again, people who I've met in my life who not particularly nice people, they tend to attract people who are like them. On the other hand, lovely people tend to attract people who are like them. So if you know somebody, for example, and you think, oh, they're a really good person, what you'll tend to find is that their friends are a bit like them. Karma, you reap what you sow. You can take the example of Jeremy Clarkson. During the pantomime, he was mocking people who hadn't been to see Maxine, and he was like saying Maxine's safe. And then last week or the week before, he's in hospital with heart issues, having to have 2 stents inserted. So it's not good to mock people. It's not good to wish ill will on other people. And you can just see this all over, can't you? Especially for me on Twitter, people who were advocating some terrible things being done to people who wouldn't take part in the medical experiment. These people are now keeling over. This is, you'd call a karmic comeback. And then the final one, I think, is that we've all maybe experienced this, is the golden rule. Things get better in our lives when we do unto others as we would like to be done to ourselves. So you could almost argue that there's some links between all of these things, the golden rule, cause and effect, law of attraction, karma. They're all kind of linked. We reap what we sow. And what I would say is that we are where we are, like in this terrible situation that we find ourselves, because far too many of us have lived our lives in direct contradiction to objective natural law. Objective meaning it's not a matter of opinion here. These are objective truths, things that are just demonstrably so. So if we kind of what I did then, I was sort of digged a little bit deeper, and we talked about human rights. Well, a human right you can define kind of negatively. You can do basically whatever you want so long as you're not harming another individual. That's what a human right is. The right to do whatever you want to do, to exercise your free will, providing that you're not physically harming somebody else. So again, you could say these are objective. I don't think, would there be anybody here would say don't, not stealing is wrong advice. I think if we're going to live in a decent society, people don't steal from each other in that type of society. Now, from here, what you can talk about is we're a long way from that, because there are still, even in the so-called truth movement, or people who are awake but really aren't. The number of those people who believe that the solution to all of our problems is just to change the politicians over, get rid of Klaus and bring somebody else in, swap one set of technocrats for another, swap one government for another. They don't understand something fundamental, which is government is a system that's based on theft. What is theft? Theft is taking something from somebody without their consent. And this is what happens with taxation. People are sent a bill by the government. The person that's received the bill has no choice in the matter. They either pay up, they pay the government what they are told that they owe them, and if they fail to do that, the government will threaten them or eventually lock them up in a cage. So there's no consent about that system. This taxation system, this cliche really is true, that taxation is theft. It involves taking money from somebody without their explicit consent. People don't agree to pay taxes. They do so because they're coerced with violence or the threat of violence, the state having the monopoly over the use of legal force. And then, what happens is that, particularly in countries like Britain, you get people who try to sort of virtue signal about how generous they are because they vote for a political party that's promised to use the force of the state to take from one group of people in society, the rich, and then give the money that they've stolen to either themselves or another group that they favour. And this is obviously immoral. And if we shouldn't really be surprised about where we are in the world at the moment, the terrible situation we find ourselves in, because there's far too many who believe that this current system of government, you could call it democracy, where 51% vote to impose tyranny on 49%, that's best case scenario. Obviously in Britain we've got 20% of people voting in Keir Starmer, who's inflicting tyranny on the other 80% who didn't vote for him, and that's just the adults of voting age. So it's not a surprise really that we are where we are, because far too many people have been perfectly happy with these violations of natural law. They've actually supported it. They've used their free will to support it. Don't murder is something else. So we should, this is a second aspect of natural law. And basically there are many people that support, again, the notion of government. It's government that starts wars that lead to mass murder. It always has been the case. So we could take the example of, a lot of people point the finger at Jews. I think in my chat with Phil from Amish Inquisition, I mentioned Dom from the sheep farm. He's basically loves talking about Jews, but I think what he's confusing here is three things: a place on the map called Israel. Second thing is confusing is the Israeli government, and then the third thing is confusing is the people that live in this place on the map, whether you want to call them Jews, Israelis. And what we shouldn't be doing here is blaming one group of people, like Jewish people, for the actions of another entity, the Jewish government. This type of thing is what the big clubs specialise in. It's called divide and rule, and it's called scapegoating, and it leads to more violence, more murder, more death. Just imagine if the same standards were applied to us as Dom. I'm presuming you're a British passport holder, same as I. Just imagine if somebody was to start slagging off British people and conflating us with the actions of the British government. The British government has murdered 1.5 million Iraqis, hundreds of thousands of Afghans, same again in Libya. Now just imagine if somebody was to try to blame us for the actions of the British government. It wouldn't be fair, would it, Dom? And I would say to you that It's not fair to do that to people who live in this place on a map called Israel. So don't murder people, don't physically assault people. So you can think about the national, let's call it the National Homicide Service. Yeah, play close attention there to the initials. You know, there were plenty of people in that who were inflicting the medical experiment on people. They'd stopped taking part in the experiment themselves, but they carried on inflicting harm. You know, those tablets, it's not called Satan's, but it's a little bit like that, you know, and they reduce this substance in your body that your brain's made of and that your body uses to manufacture hormones. These people, they must know what they're up to, but they continue to inflict, they assault, they're party to physical assaults on people through what these substances, these products that they push onto other people. So again, we shouldn't really be surprised where we are, because again, there's just been too many people, thousands and thousands of people, if not millions of people, of just police. You know, you could talk about what happened in the people's pantomime, the teachers. Way too many of those people went along with, like, even if we think about, like, you know, wearing your underpants on your face, that's restricting somebody's ability to breathe. You could call that a form of assault, couldn't you? You know, you're imposing that on children. So there was way too many people that went along with that kind of human rights abuse. People have been living for far too long in clear breach of natural law, and the law of cause and effect states, well, there's going to be consequences of that. You know, if the critical majority of society goes along with furlong and slave muzzle wearing, we shouldn't really be surprised that we end up living in a society that's completely dystopian and dysfunctional. It's a natural consequence. It's a cause and effect. Don't steal people's free will by deceiving people. That's another aspect of natural law. So, you know, obviously that went on during the people's pantomime, like through the nudge unit, for example. People must have known about this deception because it was pretty obvious, and they chose to go along with it to keep their salaries. So people used their free will to go against natural law. So again, actions have consequences. We shouldn't be surprised about where we are. Don't steal. Another aspect of natural law that I mentioned was don't steal people's free will by coercing them through either bribes or threats. So again, there was loads of that going on over the last 4 years. No medical experiment, no job, no medical experiment, no foreign travel, no medical experiment, no music festival if you're a teenager. So there was far too many people went along with this breach of natural law, and we can't just expect to get away with that. You know, there is going to be consequences of us using our free will to embrace, I don't know, what you might call evil rather than good. And there is a cause and effect. There is a karmic reaction to that, if you want to call it that. Obviously, another one would be don't trespass. So we have people snitching on each other during the pantomime. We've got the government and the police surveilling people. Far too many people are involved in that, and again, actions have consequences. So we shouldn't really be surprised about what's happened, because we've chosen to use our free will to live in clear breach of natural law. We've got what we deserved. I guess another thing you could say is it's like going to a restaurant and ordering a shit sandwich, you know, and then, you know, you eat what you've ordered. That's basically what we've done. The other thing that I talked about is how I think at one time, like when I was growing up in the 1970s in Britain, I think Britain was a better place to live then because the culture was better. more people in Britain in the 70s were actually living closer to the principles of natural law than is the case in the 2020s. And I think the reason for that was that back in those days, um, the British culture was based on Judeo-Christian values. And what's happened since then has been, mostly through the education system and the telly box and the mainstream media, we've had all of this sort of what you might call authoritarian Marxism, rampant atheism, New Age. It doesn't matter what you're just as some cells. You might get reincarnated, but you can do whatever you want to do in this life, and there's no comebacks. So these people are denying a very, very important aspect of what goes on in the world, which is the law of cause and effect. They think that they can do whatever they want, and it's all going to be okay. And I'm saying to you that that's not the case. That's a massive truth bomb. We reap what we sow, and it's too easy to blame it on Jill Bates, on Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, all the rest of these people. The big issue here is that these people, all they can do is just speak a few words, right? To turn those words into actions and to create the nightmare that we experienced and we're still experiencing, you need millions of what I would call low-level enablers, people who are willing to sell their soul, people who are willing to break natural law, people who are willing to be party to stealing, murder, physical assault, stealing people's free will by being economical with the truth. You need people who are prepared to do that. If you don't have the low-level enablers, people like Jill Bates and Klaus, they are powerless. So do you see what I'm trying to say here? We've got no one else to blame but ourselves. We've lived in clear breach of natural law, and what we're suffering from is just a clear consequence of that. So I think what's happened, obviously, is that, we've had, as I say, with the education system, we've had atheism and nihilism. Life's meaningless, life's pointless, move swiftly to your next shopping destination. There's no deeper meaning to life at all. Let's not think about those things. Trust the science, comrade, instead. And I think what's happened is that the big club, particularly in Britain, they've sought, and I think they've done quite successfully, to undermine basic moral values. And in our case, our moral values were based on Christianity. Another thing that I talked about was just the fact that Jesus Christ, I think it's undeniable if you actually look at it, that Jesus Christ did live amongst us 2,000 years ago. I know we're sort of, that's rubbish, I always remember this when I was a teacher. There were people who, even if you mention the fact that the world might be created by God, if you disagreed with the idea that everything was created by nothing and there was no creator, then you were ridiculed for that. You were a batshit crazy creationist. But anyway, look, I think it's fairly obvious that the world had a creator. I think there's very, very strong evidence that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, lived amongst us 2,000 years ago. You've got the letter that, and again, what I would recommend atheists, agnostics to do is to do like a little bit of research on your own about this, because I think it's only when you do your own research that you probably will believe it. You need to kind of discover this yourself. So one thing you could look at is the letter that Pontius Pilate wrote to the emperor in Rome at the time of Jesus's arrest. It's very, very telling. The other thing as well is that in the Bible, you might have heard of King Herod, and King Herod was the guy that ordered all the babies in Judea, what they now call Israel, to be murdered. So is this guy just made up? No, Herod existed. Do some research about King Herod and what he did. For me personally, I know I've even stood in Herod's palace on the top of what they call Masada, above the Dead Sea. So historical figures that existed during Jesus's time. Yeah, as do the accounts of Roman and Jewish historians. So if you were to just do a Google search, Roman and Jewish historical accounts of Jesus Christ, and this is outside of the Bible. You could also look at the behaviour of the early church founders. Many of those met their deaths in extremely horrible ways. All they had to do to avoid those deaths was just to basically renounce their belief in Jesus Christ and what he said. But these people, their faith in Jesus was so strong that they refused to do that. And as I say, they died these horrible deaths. So for me, that deepness of faith suggests that they knew the score. The other thing as well that's often overlooked is the evidence for Jesus in other religious documents. So, for example, a shout out to Ruslan, a Kazakh guy that I know. He's a Muslim, and I've talked to him in the past about what the Quran says about Jesus. So it's not just accounts of what Jesus did don't just appear in the Bible; they also appear in the Quran too. Also, although Jesus is rejected by people that follow the Torah, that's not to say that Jews deny that Jesus was a historical figure. So the final thing that I kind of talked about was, because I think there are many people. I think I gave a shout out to the kind of the rise above people. I like their stuff, and I don't have any problem with Dom from the sheep farm and stuff. But what I think is a shame is that they will rubbish the Bible, and it's quite clear from what they say that they've never read it. They've never even picked up the book. So I find this a really strange, a really strange form of behavior. It'd be like announcing yourself as an expert on a film that you've never even seen, or just basing your view on a film on somebody else's second or third hand account of a film review or something. And then you need to go and look at the original document, don't you, before you can make a reasoned view. Would you, a question there, I don't know, Dom or Lance from Rise Above, whether they want to write anything in the comments there, but do you think that's fair enough, that before you make a judgment on a book you should read it? Would that not be a sensible thing to do? Personally, I just think it's undeniable. But what I think is amazing is that many people don't know actually what's in the Bible. Instead, what they go off is maybe what's on some internet site, or what the BBC say, or what Justin Welby says. And obviously, organised religion has been corrupted. It was corrupted during the time of Jesus. It's corrupted now. Justin Welby is, with all the kind of woke distortion. So the Church of England doesn't really follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, not at all. So I think the other thing to say as well is, the other question that I posed was that was Jesus advocating social control? You could refer to the followers of the teachings of Jesus Christ as Christians in the true sense of the word, couldn't you? Whereas you could say maybe the people that follow Justin Welby, the people that follow kind of the corrupted, organised religion, you could call that churchianity. So really what I'm talking about here is true Christianity, what Jesus said that's been recorded in the 4 New Testament Gospels. So my question here is, was Jesus advocating social control? Because this is the kind of standard cliche that's wielded out by people who've never read the Bible, nevertheless have got very strong views about the Bible. So was Jesus advocating, it's just a social control mechanism? You must have heard that line. So, if you I think the most obvious example would be the golden rule, wouldn't it? That that do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself. That was what Jesus said in Gospel of Matthew chapter 5 verse 12. So does do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself, does that sound like a social control mechanism? For me, it doesn't. It sounds like a plea from Jesus that really we need to live more in accordance with natural law. Like, you wouldn't, would you, doing unto others what you would like to be done to yourself. Would you like somebody to nick your stuff? Would you like to be deceived? Of course not. Of course not. So it doesn't sound like a social control mechanism at all. What it does sound like to me is a plea from Jesus Christ, the Son of God, to live a good life. And again, from chapter 5 of the book of Matthew, verse 16, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So I think, again, this is Jesus speaking. So what Jesus, again, is saying is that you've got to live a good life. You're expected to live a good life. So your good works must give glory to your Father, our Father who are in heaven, who created us. Because I don't buy into the theory of evolution, that I was a blob of slime, then I became a tadpole, and then I became, a dolphin. And then I don't believe that. And if you do, I think that's just really stupid. Like the Big Bang, something went bang. We don't know what it was. We don't know where it came from. We don't know why it went bang, but it did. And then there was some primordial soup, but we don't know where that came from. It's garbage. It's absolutely garbage. Like a car, it has a creator, it has a manufacturer. The world, we have a creator. It's God. Again, from Matthew chapter 5, verse 34 to 37, Jesus says, but I say to you, do not swear an oath. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. For whatever is more than this is from the evil one. So again, what Jesus is saying is, don't deceive people. Tell the truth always. And we are where we are now in this terrible situation because people have used their free will to go against this fundamental truth that's been articulated by Jesus there. Or if you want to think about natural law, we shouldn't be deceiving people. We shouldn't be stealing people's free will by going out deliberately to deceive them. Something else that I think is quite interesting is that I talked about on this podcast was the difference really between what true Christianity is and how it's been corrupted. So again, these are the words of Jesus. Again, chapter 5 of the book of Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, verse 17, Jesus says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law. Now the law is the 10 commandments, right? So don't steal people's stuff, don't murder people, don't bear false witness, so don't try to deceive people. Can you see how all of this is connecting? The 10 commandments, you can see some very, very obvious links to what people call natural law. You can see some Jesus is saying it himself. I've not come to replace the 10 commandments. I've come to kind of reinforce it, that this is what you should be doing, guys. So I'll read that again. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law, the 10 commandments. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. He goes on later on. This is in chapter 7, verse 21. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father. So I think it's pretty clear here that we can't just do whatever we want to do with our lives and live in clear breach of natural law and then just expect Jesus to save us without actually doing any work ourselves, without doing any repentance ourselves. We can't just live our lives just repeatedly making the same sins over and over and over and over and over again, and then at the end of our life saying, Lord, 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 can I come into? It's not going to work. Now this is again, if you think about modern churchianity, what they really push is Paul. So the New Testament after the Gospels is most of it is written by this guy called Paul, Saul of Tarsus, and he was like this guy who he early on in his life he was murdering Christians, but he went through this conversion process, so we're told. Anyway, he says all who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. So which seems to be quite different from not everyone who says Lord, Lord will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father. In other words, the will of my Father is the Ten Commandments, what they call the Jewish law. So just some conclusions then. First thing I want to say is that actions have consequences. The world is in a terrible position now because far too many of us have used our free will to live in violation of natural law. We've turned away from the truth. We've turned away from the moral Christian values, and that's why we are where we are. We've lived in clear violation of natural law. Actions have consequences, and we're actually just, we've repeatedly dumped in our living room, and now we're living in a shithole. Second, pardon my French. Second thing, Christianity is being corrupted. I think that's pretty clear. I think what we need to do is to go back and focus an awful lot more on what Jesus said. That would be my recommendation. When you pick up the Bible, if you've got like half an hour, or the first thing that you should do when you pick up your Bible is study Jesus. Study what Jesus said. You've got a choice, haven't you? With 5 minutes block, you can either use your 5 minutes to read some Paul, or you can use your 5 minutes to read some Jesus. And I would say, read what Jesus said as recorded in those 4 Gospels, particularly the first 3. There's an awful lot of recorded speech in those first 3 Gospels that contain some amazing truth bombs, and I think you can, once you've read those, you'll see the connection to natural law immediately. Obviously, if you've never read them, then you won't know how they connect to natural law, but they do. And I think the third thing that I would say is that we are expected to, during our lives, we're not meant to be perfect. Satan is allowed to tempt us whilst we're down here, but what we are expected to do is to recognize when we have screwed up, recognize that, and repent from it. And there's more to that than just saying sorry and a prayer to Jesus. What we need to do is to change our lives and make sure that we don't do that again. That for example, that we stop lying, we stop trying to deceive people, we don't take part in, or we don't support theft. We don't indirectly support organisations that are involved in murdering people, and they use our money to do that murdering. And then the final thing, I suppose, if you really want to boil it all down, the world we'll only really get out of this once we kind of embrace what's called the golden rule, which is what Jesus said: do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself. And we are where we are because most people they live in this kind of me, I'll do what I want, and I don't really care about what impacts of my go-getting behaviour have on other people. And that's all I want to say today, so God bless.